After my divorce, I locked myself away, then a cleaner's nightly TEA changed everything. I will never forget the day everything fell apart. The finality of the words sliced through my heart like glass. I felt them stick in my throat. My marriage was over. I found myself curled up on the bathroom floor, tears streaming down my cheeks, echoing off the tiles. I could barely breathe, my chest felt like a vice gripping me tighter with every sob. I locked the door behind me and turned the world out. Days turned into weeks, and I retreated further into my little bubble of despair. My apartment transformed into a dark fortress. Shadows loomed in every corner. Dust settled, and silence consumed everything. Other than the thud of my heart, there was no sound. I stopped answering calls, letting my phone ring unanswered. Friends faded into distant memories. I was isolated in my own sorrow, where pain seemed familiar, but hope felt like a cruel joke. Every evening, I'd hear her Miriam, the cleaner. She would arrive right at dusk, her mop scraping against the wooden floors, filling the stillness with life. There was something odd about her routine. As she cleaned, she'd whisper softly, like she was sharing secrets with the dust bunnies hiding under the couch. And then, I noticed it, the scent of herbal tea wafting through the air. It permeated my fortress. Sweet, with a hint of something extra. I could almost taste the chamomile enveloping me, like a warm hug from an old friend. One crisp night, unable to resist the allure, I cracked the door open a sliver. I was drawn to her routine. The way she moved, so purposefully, yet almost like a dance. My heart raced. There was an aura around her, a mystery I felt compelled to know. Miriam would sit down for a moment, sipping her tea from a chipped mug, eyes closed in a moment of peace. I lingered in the shadows, tremors of anticipation dancing along my skin. What was it about that tea? It was as if it held answers to questions I didn't even know I had. Curiosity pulsed within me, igniting my numb heart. Then, one night, a shiver rippled through the air. I caught a glimpse of her as she lowered her mug. Her eyes flashed with something profound, a knowing that transcended words. I felt it in the pit of my stomach, a connection, a call to step beyond the walls of my grief. But just as quickly, her gaze darted to the door, and suddenly, I panicked. What if she knew I was there? What if she sensed my brokenness? My heart thundered in my chest. I silently slipped back into the darkness of my cell, feeling both intrigue and fear coil tightly within me. Who was this mysterious woman? And what was hiding in that cup of tea? Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The following day, the shadows seemed to deepen, and I found it impossible to focus on anything but Miriam. Her presence invaded my thoughts with each passing hour, the way she drank her tea, the soft sighs she released, as if balancing the weight of her own world while cleaning mine. I wondered if she was aware of the war raging inside me, or if she was simply oblivious to the life unfolding behind the locked door. That evening, guilt and restlessness pulled me out of bed. I wore an old oversized sweater, its fabric comforting against my skin, like the embrace I so desperately craved. I crept towards the door, telling myself I wouldn't stay long, just long enough to listen, to reconnect with the world. I resisted the urge to imagine what conversations I was missing out on, what laughter was outside my walls. As I opened the door an inch, the lingering scent of chamomile hit me like a wave. A warm glow filled the room, and I watched as Miriam sat cross-legged on the floor, tea mug resting in her lap, gently swaying as she swiped her mop across the floor. The light caught her profile, illuminating the worry lines etched into her face, a weariness that was all too familiar. "What's the point of cleaning if no one's there to see it?" she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. I froze, wondering if her words held a weight meant solely for me. Had she sensed my presence? I inched back towards the shadows, every instinct urging me to retreat, but an invisible force drew me closer. In that moment, I heard a muffled sound, choked laughter. It was coming from the hallway. I stepped into the dim light, drawn by the noise. There, at my door, stood a small gathering of children, their faces bright with mischief. They were lost, peering curiously around the corner of my apartment, when a little girl with a pink ribbon in her hair reached out and knocked softly. "Is anyone home?" she called. Somewhere deep within my chest, a flicker of warmth ignited, but it was swiftly snuffed by fear. I took a step back, confessing to the darkness that seemed to cloak me. What would I say? What would I show them? Miriam's eyes widened in surprise, and she stood slowly. "Hello, there." She greeted them, her tone instantly nurturing. "Are you looking for someone? Mrs. Green said she needed the boxes from the back of your hallway." One boy piped up before darting his gaze to me. Are you okay?" The girl tugged on his sleeve, her childlike innocence turned to concern. My heart collapsed in on itself. Here was life bursting at my threshold, yet I felt undeserving of its simplicity. Why did their laughter hurt so sweetly? I opened my mouth, but no words came, only an overwhelming silence draped over us. "Wait here," Miriam instructed them kindly, her voice steady and full of warmth. She turned back towards my apartment, her brow furrowing as she seemed to make a decision. "Could you let us in for a moment?" I could feel my breath quickening, panic taking root deep within. I clutched my sweater tighter, unwilling to step closer to the edge of vulnerability. Miriam approached cautiously, eyes searching mine. "You don't have to be alone, you know. I understand. We all have battles." Her sincerity felt like an invitation to finally peel back the layers of my grief, yet fear wrapped its tendrils tightly around me, locking me in place. "Please," she added gently, and somewhere in her plea, the ache of loneliness intertwined with the warmth of understanding pulled at my heartstrings. Just then, the little girl peeked around Miriam, her innocent eyes filled with trust and sweetness that shattered my resolve. What harm could come from letting a little light seep into my darkness? But before I could respond, a loud crash shattered the moment. The weight of heavy boxes tumbling onto the floor echoed through the hall, startling everyone. I glanced to see the children scrambling back, laughter replaced by startled gasps. Miriam stepped forward, her eyes darting to me urgently. "I'll check on them," she said, barely an outline now enveloped in kindness and purpose. I could feel the walls of my fortress closing in again as I watched her navigate this unexpected chaos, a stark contrast to my own crushing stillness. Hope flickered in the air, an invitation to step outside my self-imposed prison, but dread held me back like an anchor. As Miriam gathered the disoriented children, I felt a gnawing realization settle. With every ounce of compassion she poured into those kids, she held the key to more than just my wellness. She was slowly unraveling the ties that bound me to my pain. When she turned back towards me one last time, there was an intensity in her gaze that made my heart tremble. "You are not your loneliness," she whispered, a wave of understanding washing over us even from a distance. I needed to embrace it, but freedom felt terrifying. Then, without warning, the loud crash echoed and broke the moment, leaving a room steeped in unknowing. I could either let the children and Miriam draw me back into the world, or retreat to solitude and lock the door once more. I barely had the time to grapple with my decision when I heard a murmured word, my name, and my heart stopped. The echo of an old voice intertwined with Miriam's, covertly disclosing a truth yet to be revealed. All at once, the past surged to the forefront. Who had just spoken my name? The pulse of my fears thundered to life. I was not only facing my loneliness, I was about to confront ghosts I thought were buried forever. The following days unfolded in a blur that teetered between bewildering hope and suffocating fear. After that evening, I remained ensconced in my self-imposed isolation, but new sensations began to unfurl within me like the hesitant opening of a flower beneath a weak sun. The laughter of the children echoed in my mind, mingling with Miriam's soothing presence like a gentle hum of possibility. It was intoxicating and terrifying all at once. Each night, as the shadows deepened and stretched across my walls, I marveled at how the simple act of someone cleaning my space could awaken long-dormant memories. Beyond the walls of my apartment, the world seemed alive, a dance of connections I had long abandoned. I often pictured Miriam, cross-legged on my floor, sipping her chamomile tea, a quiet guardian guarding the doorway to my heart. Yet the moment I remembered her kindness, it twisted within me, the desire to step forward crushed by my instinct to retreat. The echo of my name haunted me, soft and inviting, like a forgotten lullaby from childhood. I tried to dismiss it, to push it down, but I could still feel her voice coiling around my heart like ivy creeping over stone, threatening to expose the vulnerability I spent a lifetime building secrets around. Who had spoken it? A figment of my imagination or a voice from the past attempting to bridge the chasms of regret? I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, the darkness dank and heavy with unspoken words. Then came the night I picked up my phone, desperate to drown out the silence. I aimlessly scrolled through my contacts until I stumbled upon names that twisted my good. A few friends, a couple of family members, and there it was, sitting at the bottom of the list like a curse, Sarah. My ex-wife's name tasted bitter, a reminder of my loss surfacing like a bruise. For a brief moment, I considered calling her, listening to the sound of her voice on the other end, bringing chilling relief mixed with pain. But I resisted. I didn't want to drudge up feelings too raw to face. Instead, I slipped back into the familiar embrace of solitude, the glow of my phone lighting up the dark corners of my confinement. But life, it seemed, was not done with me yet. The next evening, as I lurked in the shadows, I witnessed a scene that froze my breath. Miriam was engaged in a lively conversation with one of the children, the little girl in the pink ribbon, her laughter spilling out of her like music, each note coaxing warmth into cold, hard reality. And then something changed. A flicker of silver in the air. I watched, apprehensive and attentive, as Miriam produced something from her pocket, holding it between her fingers like a precious secret. It was a small piece of paper, crumpled but vibrant yellow, with something written on it. I strained my ears, holding on to every syllable she spoke. "Your invitation to the picnic is very special," she was saying to the girl, her smile as luminous as the scattered evening light. "You should give this to your mom. She'll want to come." The little girl giggled, her eyes shining bright with innocence, but it was as if Miriam's words were shouting back at me through a wall of glass. I felt the constriction around my chest tighten. Mom, the word struck me like a lightning bolt, igniting a flare of memory. Sarah with a picnic basket, laughter under the sun, our dreams gently woven together, each moment sacred and vibrant. I wanted to wrest my mind free of that memory, but it clung to me harder now, binding me in an agonizing grip. Suddenly, the warmth of hope I'd felt coiling around me looked too much like betrayal in the aftermath of the love I had lost. This time, I felt not only the sting of longing but an understanding that the joy of connection was tangled in proximity to pain. As the children scampered off, their giggles echoing down the hallway, Miriam paused just outside my door, exhaling a breath that didn't belong to her alone. "You deserve light, even in the shadows," she said quietly, though I knew she meant it for me. And at that moment, a new fear took shape. Did she understand what she was offering? The fragility of pulling someone from their self-imposed exile? I was not ready, and I felt feverish and raw, teetering on the brink of surrendering. Before I could inch back towards my sanctuary, I heard the muffled sound again, a word, a name. This time it was louder and more persistent. Miriam. My heart, already racing, thudded wildly against my ribcage. Who was calling her? Had someone ventured closer than I realized? I could sense the shift in the atmosphere, the air thickened with unspoken emotions. My mind rushed to dark conclusions. Was it someone from her past? Did she harbor secrets that could shatter the fragile connection we were still building? the chaos that ensued, a mixture of startled voices and hurried footsteps, echoed up to my apartment door, and the world around me faded for that instant. Desperation swirled within me, mingling with the desire to reach out to protect her, perhaps, or to cloak myself in a semblance of connection. But would such a choice consume me? As I peered through the small gap of the door, just enough to glimpse what unfolded, I couldn't prepare for what awaited. The sight of Miriam surrounded by a figure cloaked in shadows, their features obscured as they loomed near. My breath caught, anticipation and dread spinning in a dance of uncertainty. What I was about to uncover would unravel the delicate threads that sought to stitch my heart back together. I was on the precipice of something greater than I had ever faced, a revelation that threatened to either bind us closer or sever ties forever. The evening air prickled with tension, a frayed thread of fate binding Miriam and the figure outside my door in an intricate dance. I clutched the doorframe, heart pounding, every instinct screaming at me to retreat. My pulse quickened as the shadowy figure leaned closer, obscuring Miriam from sight. With each heartbeat, an echo of uncertainty sliced through the thickening air. Who was this person? What weight did they carry that gave them such power over her serenity? I bit my lip, straining for clarity. The shadows didn't just cloak the figure, they cloaked my fears, and I struggled against the tendrils of doubt that grasped at my resolve. Why was I afraid? My instinct screamed to protect, not only her but the tentative connection that had quietly anchored me in this sea of solitude. I peered through the gap just as the figure spoke, their voice a low murmur that sent a cold shiver racing down my spine. I know you're here, Miriam. You can't keep avoiding this forever. Miriam's posture stiffened, the warmth in her demeanor flickering like a candle in the wind. I am not avoiding anything, Jamie. I just need time to think. Jamie. The name hit me with the force of a crashing wave. The reality struck, opening wounds I thought had long scabbed over. The name belonged to her brother, the one I remembered being entangled in a web of choices that had brought their family to the brink of heartbreak. In that moment, the laughter of children intertwined with murmurs of anguish, dragging me into a mix of memories too heavy to bear. Time? He repeated incredulously. You've been running away for so long. You need to confront this. Everyone needs you to. You cannot disappear from their lives. My breath hitched. This was not just about her and me anymore, it was about everyone tethered to the complexities of love and loss. I couldn't help but feel an undesirable sense of intrusion, as if I were eavesdropping on a sacred thread that connected their past and the future of everyone affected. Miriam's voice, steady and resilient, cut through the darkness. And what about my own happiness, Jamie? If I let go and embrace them, what do I have left of myself? The figure softened, yet the shadows of conflict clung to him. You'll always be you, Miriam. That's the point. But you have to choose. You can't stay here forever, you have to live in the light. They need you. I need you. I was frozen, pangs of longing and understanding intermingling like dark clouds overhead. Her family's need for her collided painfully with her desire to shield herself from the unknown. Somewhere deep inside, their conversation awakened something. It gnawed at the insides of me, a desire for liberation, connection, and love, each one a beam of light breaking through the clouds. Then, her voice shifted as if spurred by newfound strength. You don't understand how hard it is. It's too painful. Memories don't just vanish, they linger. And I can't continue to put myself out there only to be left shattered again. Suddenly, a flash of recognition surged through me. I was not the only one carrying the weight of heartbreak. Here stood Miriam, facing the remnants of her past and all the ghosts that decided to haunt her. All these months of silence had not been solitude but an intricate dance of healing. We were both wounded, layered in scars that made vulnerability a foreign language. In that moment, almost by instinct, I lifted my hand, hesitating for a heartbeat before pushing the door open slightly. A creak echoed against the thick tension, and both their heads turned. Our eyes met, and in an instant, I felt the weight of the world settle into a jagged calm. Jamie's gaze flickered between us, and in that brief exchange, an understanding wrapped around us like a fragile thread. Miriam, I breathed, stepping closer into the dim hallway, a forgotten whisper swelling into something resonant. The words were barely a promise, but they hung heavily in the air, filled with uncharted potential and the fears of a shattered heart. But before I could speak further, Jamie took a step in front of Miriam, shielding her like an unexpected guardian. "This is between us, stay out of it," he snapped, the sudden tension palpable, returning to darkness. "Wait," I almost shouted, but Miriam's gentle hand rested against my arm, grounding me as she shook her head. "Don't, please." Not now, but as I looked at her, my heart bolstered by everything that lingered unspoken, I could see the conflict etching itself deeper upon her features. This was a moment of reckoning, and I felt the edges of that possibility fraying at the seams. Just when I thought things couldn't deepen further, Jamie pulled out a photograph from his pocket, holding it tightly between his fingers. "Then let them remember you as you were, Miriam," he said in a low voice, his eyes narrowing. "Because if you walk away, you will be lost forever." With trembling hands, he released the picture. It floated toward Miriam as if the air itself held its breath. There, suspended in time, was a memory I never knew: Miriam in a sun-drenched park, laughing with a child who looked eerily like the girl in the pink ribbon. In that fleeting moment, an icy dread wrapped around my heart, the implications hammering home. Was this the reason for her retreat? The joy captured in that photograph held a heavy truth: the past that lingered and a decision poised to either save or shatter us all. And just like that, in the mixture of unresolved emotions, I felt as if something precious could fracture at any second, and I was helpless to stop it. It was an unwritten chapter that beckoned, holding both our futures in its grip, and sheer terror coursed through me at the thought of the choices that lay ahead. The shadows in the hallway felt as thick as the air I struggled to breathe. Miriam stood frozen, her eyes locked on the photograph that hovered between the three of us, the quietest chaos manifesting in that single frame. Jamie's fervent insistence that she should confront her past softened momentarily as he saw the impact the image had on her, but his own anger began to simmer once again, coiling tighter around his protective facade. "Make the right choice, Miriam," he said quietly, his voice trembling on the edges of desperation. "You can't keep hiding from what matters." Her fingers reached out, trembling as they brushed the edge of the photograph, invoking a torrent of memories that pulsed just beneath her surface, memories I could only begin to fathom after the cracks of that moment had been laid bare. I wanted to reach for her, to pull her free from the grips of her past, but the weight of Jamie's presence loomed like an unyielding fortress. "What if I don't want to remember?" she murmured, her voice a thread that barely broke the silence. "What if I'd rather forget everything altogether?" Jamie shook his head slowly, sorrow etched on his face now. "Running will not help you heal. You can't outrun your reality." His voice dipped, growing quieter but no less fervent. "You owe it to yourself to remember, to feel, even if it hurts." In that moment, my heart softened towards him, the quiet anguish revealing a world where hurt lived and thrived, where sadness and loss made people act in ways they regretted. Perhaps it was in my own loneliness that I began to see the complex weave surrounding them both: how grief could twist even the most loving intentions into chains that bind. With every muscle in my body straining to bridge the fracturing gap between us, I cleared my throat. "Miriam," I said gently, not wanting to break the tenuous thread holding us together. "What if facing this isn't just about what you've lost, but also about what you can reclaim? What if there is still light waiting for you beyond this darkness?" Her gaze shifted toward me, flickering like a flame hesitant to dance closer to a fire. "You don't understand, Jamie. You don't know my story." There was anger in her voice, but it was laced with pain, a deep wound that stung like a physical blow. "What if I wanted to?" I replied, pushing through the ache in my chest. "What if I wanted to help you find the pieces you think you've lost?" She watched me then, eyes glassy and searching, and for a fleeting heartbeat I believed I had pierced the veil around her heart, but it fell away as quickly as it came together. "I can't," she replied suddenly, breaking free from my gaze. "It's not just about me. There are lives intertwined with mine, destinies I can't influence without ruining everything else." Like a spill of ink on a page, or a splash of paint on a canvas, Jamie interjected with bitterness tainting his tone. You hide behind your fears while they try to grasp at your shadows. Don't you understand? You can't rewrite what's already been written, but you can choose to ink new chapters, she echoed softly, lost in thought, her expression slipping between sorrow and hope. The pieces of this tangled moment began to pull on my heart, a tether tied between her desire to embrace a future and her fear of pain's return. The photograph lay abandoned on the floor now, and I could feel the pivot inside her like a delicate fulcrum tipping toward nostalgia or away from it entirely. Then, just as she opened her mouth to respond, the vibrant trill of a phone cut through the intensity. We all flinched, but the noise drew Miriam's attention fully. It was her phone, buzzing on the edge of the table behind us, the screen lighting up with a name that held all the weight of her past and a sliver of her present. The world seemed to halt in that split second. Jamie's face shifted to one of disbelief as I was thrown into the depths of uncertainty. The name hadn't registered fully, but the unease that crept into the room thickened the tension with the certainty that something monumental was about to unravel right before us. Miriam, Jamie breathed, standing slightly taller, his frame brimming with questions. The impossible weight of expectation hung heavy. She hesitated, glancing between the phone's beckoning light and the yawning chasm of emotion that enveloped us. "You have to pick it up," I whispered, the words involuntarily tumbling from my lips. "You can't ignore it." Her fingers reached out, the air crackled with possibilities, myriad paths diverging before us. I felt the tight grip of fate in that moment, all the threads of consequence weaving through our hearts. Just before she let her fingertips graze across the phone, a frightened sob escaped her throat, echoing through the silent space. "What if I'm not ready?" she whispered, a heap of uncertainty radiating from her frail body, but before she could pull away, the phone slipped from her grasp and crashed to the floor, the screen shattering like the fragile boundaries we attempted to enforce. The revelation pulsated through the air, electric and immediate, a reminder of how delicately our lives hung by an unseen thread. In that instant, Jamie's face flooded with horror, and my breath caught in my throat. Watching as the call ended and the screen darkened, I knew that nothing would be the same after this moment. Together we stood on the precipice of the unknown, hearts thunderous, and the echoes of our choices reverberating in the hollow spaces between us. The weight of the world pressed against us, and as the fragmented silence settled into an uneasy quiet, I found myself grappling with what lay next, fearing the revelation that would tether us to this moment of heartache forever. Miriam shrank back from the remnants of her shattered phone, the fragments glinting ominously under the dim hallway light. The world had somehow drifted into muted hues, where joy seemed impossibly far and every unsaid word shrieked in reprimand. "Why did I let it slip?" she whispered, her voice quavering under the weight of regret. "Maybe it's a sign," I interjected, my heart pounding like a furious drum in my chest. Despite the clash of emotions swirling in the room, my instinct clawed for a glimmer of hope. "Perhaps it's your chance to confront what you've been running from." Jamie's eyes locked onto Miriam, desperate and shining with an ache that told me his heart was teetering on the very edge of breaking. "You have to talk to them, Mir. No more hiding." The urgency in his voice mirrored the tension that clung to the air, thick and burdensome. Miriam shook her head, retreating further into herself. "It's not that easy," she shot back, every word a desperate plea. "You don't understand the mess it will unleash. I can't bring this storm upon us, people will get hurt. It's better to let sleeping ghosts lie." "But what about you?" I pressed gently, watching as frustration flickered across Jamie's face, unease mingling with an unyielding desire to protect. "What about your healing? Isn't that worth some chaos?" A flash of pain crossed her features, and for a moment, she was a girl reduced to shadows, trapped in a labyrinth of choices she couldn't navigate. The photograph lay in pieces, a metaphor for an unraveling of dreams that had once threaded their way through her heart. With a hesitant breath, she let the silence stretch. "And what if the chaos destroys everything I've built?" At that moment, the door creaked open just slightly, and the weight of the stillness shifted as the night crept into the room, pulling us three back from the brink if only momentarily. In the hallway, a subtle scent wafted in, the warm, herbal fragrance of chamomile floated toward us, wrapping around the tension like a soft embrace. "Tea?" A low voice ventured from the doorway. It was Miss Henderson, the elderly cleaning lady who worked in our building. Her presence felt like an unexpected blessing, a momentary refuge. She held a steaming cup filled with what looked like a delicate infusion, each herb swirling and dancing, giving the illusion of calm. "I'm sorry to intrude," Miss Henderson continued, subtly shifting her gaze to the scattered shards on the floor, "but I couldn't help but notice the shadows pooling in this hall." Thanks," Miriam said with a shaky smile, gratitude cutting through the tension. "Sometimes a cup of tea can spark a renewal," she said softly, her eyes sparkling with ancient wisdom. "The right blend can untangle even the knottiest of heartaches." Without further prompting, she stepped forward, offering the cup to Miriam. Though hesitant, Miriam lifted the cup from Miss Henderson's hands, warmth blooming between her fingers. "Please, sit with me," the woman urged, motioning for us to join. The unexpected invitation broke through the emotional barricade that had tightly ensnared our hearts. Reluctantly, we settled on the floor, the delicate balance of emotions still dancing in the air. Miriam inhaled the sweet aroma, allowing it to fill the room with a kind of softness that felt almost sacred, as if we were stepping into a moment of familial tenderness, one where ghosts faded into the margins, allowing space for whispers of nurturing hope. "That I didn't mean to pry," Miss Henderson continued, her voice low and lapping like a gentle tide against the shore. "But whatever weighs on you can't be left to stew too long. Trust me, it will catch up." I watched as Miriam's eyes glazed over, the weight of her secrets looming behind them. Her fingers gently traced the cracked edges of the cup, the action grounding her in this fragile moment. For a heartbeat, I thought she might share her fears, the churning storm within her that threatened to drown every growing glimmer of light, but just as she opened her lips, a sudden flare of raucous laughter erupted from the alley below, pulling us all back. A trio of voices rang out in boisterous cheer, the sounds of spontaneous joy startlingly stark against our fragile tapestry of emotions. "I can't," Miriam whispered, setting the tea aside as her resolve thickened into a wall. "I can't face the past. I can't ruin lives with my choices." Before I could respond, a piercing vibrato from Miriam's earlier call echoed through the hallway. Her phone buzzed. I held my breath, the moment hanging suspended like a fragile glass ornament, precariously dangling above an unseen abyss. Would she dare to look? Would she allow the past to resurface in light of the uncertain future that lay ahead? Miriam stared vacantly at her phone, fingers inching towards it before retreating again. Fear danced in her eyes, a primordial echo of a long-buried truth. "It's not just any call," she muttered, realization dawning on her like a slow tide. "It's from him, my father." The recognition sent shockwaves through the room, igniting the air with a fresh tension. Suddenly, Jamie's protective facade began to crack, a storm of emotions flaring within him. I felt the force of revelation pulse through us, the enormity of what lay ahead crashing in like an overwhelming wave. "Miriam," I began, but the overwhelming uncertainty of it all threatened to choke me. The phone vibrated again, and in that heartbeat, everything hung in the balance. The past, the present, and the potential for healing or more profound heartbreak waiting for her decision, anticipation thrumming in the room like a living, breathing entity, filled with the weight of what could be taken or reclaimed. "Miriam, it's time," Jamie said, his voice almost prayer-like, pushing her gently toward the precipice of confrontation. As Miriam stared into the screen, a single tear slipped down her cheek, glowing in the dim light. Would she answer and reveal the secrets of her past, or would she bury them deeper still? As she hovered between two worlds, the quiet pressure in the room multiplied, and we leaned closer, both full of hope and buried trepidation, and as the phone continued its urgent pulsations, it was clear this moment held the power to change everything, but the choice was hers alone to make. Miriam's trembling hand hovered just above the screen, caught between the gravity of the past and the silence of the present. "What do I say?" she murmured, her voice barely a whisper, as if she were afraid that uttering her thoughts aloud would summon the ghosts she so desperately sought to avoid. For a fleeting moment, the world fell away, leaving only her unspoken fears dangling in the air. Jamie leaned in closer, his expression a mix of encouragement and dread. Whatever it is, you can handle it, he urged, though the uncertainty flickering in his eyes betrayed his own reservations. The tea, forgotten on the floor, steamed quietly between us, each swirl of vapor carrying away the sense of impending conflict for just a heartbeat longer. Miss Henderson watched, her eyes filled with a calmness that seemed to transcend age and circumstance. Sometimes, she said softly, the hardest conversations can lead to the most healing. Miriam's breath hitched as she finally pressed her thumb against the screen, and the resonating ringtone imbued the room with a new urgency. This was the moment she had dreaded yet secretly longed for, a chance to confront the shadows of her past. "Just breathe," I whispered to her, trying to hold steady the impending tornado swirling within us. That we sat in silence, the weight of her decision heavy on our shoulders. Miriam let out a shuddering breath and answered the call, her voice wavering, "Dad?" The world around us blurred, crashing waves competing against her quiet conversation. I received your message," she continued, every word articulated with care, as if stepping through fragile glass, fearing it might shatter at the slightest touch. Jamie's hand found mine, squeezing tightly, our hearts synchronized in rhythm, while the air shifted palpably as every unspoken fear danced at the edges, ready to explode. "That I don't know if you want to hear this, but," Miriam faltered, glancing up at us, searching for a lifeline. Time stretched like an elastic band, and I felt my heart hammer as I wondered what revelations would spill forth. Suddenly, a voice crackled from the other end, a rough edge to it that disoriented us all. "Miriam, I know I haven't been there. I thought you wanted to forget. I thought that would be better for you." Her eyes flared, disappointment swirling with disbelief. "Forget? You mean ignoring everything? The years? The hurt?" With every word, she stepped deeper into the complexity of unresolved emotions, the entangled realm of love and disappointment threading its way back into the room like a tempestuous storm. As Miss Henderson sat with us, she gestured toward the tea, as if offering its soothing warmth to balance the growing chaos. "The past can't be retaken," she murmured, casting a knowing smile at Miriam. "But it can be transformed. That I can't just let go of what you did, Dad." Miriam shouted, her voice rising with every syllable as remnants of the past converged with the fierce energy of the present. "Do you think forgetting is an option? I feel like I've been holding my breath my entire life." Jamie's hand tightened around mine even more, his grip like a tether. "Miriam, it's okay to be angry," he whispered, reminding her that vulnerability could be a form of strength. The crackling voice on the line fell silent, and I held my breath, hoping the silence wouldn't pull them both under. "Can we meet?" Her father's voice returned, laced with hesitation. "There's so much I regret, so much left unsaid." Miriam's response hung on the precipice of potential, fraught with both fear and fractured hope. "I don't know if I can. How do you expect me to just forget?" Every word was a wave crashing against her tender heart, turbulent yet cleansing. She stared hard at the screen, its illumination casting a glow that felt both inviting and sinister. Memories of everything she had endured flashed before her like a digital gallery of despair, but then, something inside her shifted. Her eyes sparkled with a fierce light, the flickers of resilience igniting a fire she thought had been stamped out long ago. "I'll think about it," she finally said, her voice steadier than it had been, punctuated by a weary strength that took us all by surprise. As she hung up the phone, the weight of her choice drifted through the room like smoke, dense and bittersweet. A sense of permanence settled, yet uncertainty still swirled unbidden. Hope twinkled in the shadows of the past, but so did fear, the fear that reconnecting could dredge up the darkest emotions or expose raw wounds still festering beneath the surface. "That I can't go back to how things were," she whispered, her face pale yet resolute, a gust of wind drawing her gaze to the window, where autumn leaves pirouette against the night sky as if in a riotous dance of independence. Ms. Henderson's wise eyes locked onto Miriam. "You're right, your past won't change. But your reaction to it? That is what remains within your control." I and the space where we gathered, hope laced with each character drawn from fear made for a cauldron of unsettling anticipation. We'd faced many tempests together, but this one promised a rift that could irrevocably change the fabric of our shared entwinement. "Promise me something," Jamie spoke quietly, breaking the silence but daring to pour love into uncertainty. Whatever happens next, we're in this with you. Just then, there was a knock at the door. Each heartbeat synchronized, each breath drawn in unison. I glanced at Miriam, who froze, her face ghostly pale. It felt like a harbinger of what was to come, the harbinger of the emotional trials that lay ahead. As she stood, the air electric with the possibilities of new beginnings and hidden truths, the door swung open. The shadows danced ominously behind her as a figure emerged. The familiar frame eclipsed the doorway, filling the space with an overwhelming presence that we had never expected to confront Miriam. The voice boomed, each syllable weighted with urgency. "It's time for you to face the truth." The tension in the air snapped back with a visceral force. This was no mere moment of reprieve, this was the beginning of the end of her silence. Miriam's breath faltered as her eyes widened, a mix of disbelief and trepidation weaving through her veins. The figure at the door, silhouetted against the dim hallway light, bore the unmistakable contours of her estranged father. Her pulse quickened, echoing in the silence like war drums heralding a hard-fought battle. "Dad?" she uttered, her voice catching in her throat as the shock of his presence sank in. The choice to engage with a ghost from her past seemed to reverberate through the room, the weight of it almost too much to bear. Jamie tightened his grip on my hand, both of us frozen like deer in headlights, fully aware that we were teetering on the edge of an emotional cliff. Ms. Henderson, who had always been the embodiment of steadfast support, leaned forward, her gaze probing as if attempting to assess the unblockable barriers Miriam had erected over the years. The doorway stood ajar, an invitation and a threat rolled into one. "I came to talk," her father said, his voice softer now, echoes of regret woven into each word. He stepped into the room, the vulnerability of his posture clashing painfully against the fortress Miriam had built. "You came," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper as a wave of old wounds surged forth raw and barely healed, "but never forgotten. I've been thinking about everything for far too long." His eyes swam with emotions tangled in remorse and longing. "And I know I can't change the past, but I need you to know how deeply sorry I am." Tears pooled in Miriam's eyes, threatening to spill over. "Sorry doesn't erase the years of silence, Dad. It doesn't erase the hurt." The chirp of the nearby clock punctuated her words, marking each beat of a heart in disbelief, torn between wanting to scream and yearning to listen. He nodded, pain etched across his features. "You're right, and I've spent every day regretting it. I thought the distance would protect you, but I see now it only hurt us both. I was selfish. I didn't know how to fix it." Her breath hitched as she took a step backwards, the physical space mirroring her emotional retreat. "You didn't even try. You just left everything behind. And now, here you are, wanting my forgiveness like it's an easy gift to give. I know it's not easy, and I don't expect you to forgive me today, or tomorrow. But I want to truly understand your pain," he replied, reaching out as if to bridge an unseen chasm. "Will you let me speak? Please?" With the intensity in the room amplifying, Jamie's eyes were wide. He clearly understood the tension enveloping Miriam like a shroud. His other hand reached out for her, an offering of solidarity amidst the encroaching storm. "You can decide how to approach this, Miriam. No pressure. No expectations. Why now?" she finally managed, her voice trembling with renewed anger and confusion. "Why come back now after all this time? I'm not just your father, I'm a broken man who lost everything. It shattered me. I thought silence was a way out," her father said, the tremor in his voice revealing his own vulnerabilities. "But I see now I've been locked away in my regrets, just like you. I want to face it with you, to make some semblance of it right." Miriam's lips quivered, her heart a battlefield of clashing desires. She wanted to scream, to tell him the pain of never knowing if she was worthy of love because he hadn't fought for her. But she also felt an undeniable yearning to reconnect, to sift through the complex layers of grief and love that had defined her for so long. "I just don't know if I can," she whispered, the fight draining from her as tears escaped, cascading down her cheeks unbidden. "Then don't. Just let me talk, let me show you my truth, and you can decide if you want to share any of yours," her father implored, sincerity radiating from him. In that moment, the room felt alive, a tension hanging like an electric current, charged with the unsteady pulse of both danger and hope. Ms. Henderson watched intently as if placing the threads of healing into their fragile hands. Birds outside began to stir, ushering in the first hints of dawn. Each passing moment brought the weight of choice crashing back into the room. Would Miriam take the plunge into this tumultuous vortex of emotion? Just as she opened her mouth to respond, a loud crash echoed from the kitchen. We whipped our heads around, startled, the sound shivering through our hearts like shattered glass. "Miriam?" Jamie asked, his voice trembling, the uncertainty in his eyes making the air feel thicker. An inauspicious omen had catapulted us back to reality, interrupting the fragile negotiations. "Stay here," she said, her voice gaining an unexpected steadiness as she steeled herself. Miriam hesitated, throwing one last glance at her father and then at Jamie, before heading towards the source of the noise. As she stepped into the next room, a suffocating sense of anticipation loomed heavy on our shoulders. The moment the door closed behind her, we were left in a fragile silence, suspended between the past's haunting shadows and the flickering embers of a hesitant future. What awaited her in that kitchen? What tangible truths and hidden fears lay speared on the skewers of fate, awaiting her return? Miriam steadied herself against the wall as she moved toward the kitchen. The soft hum of the refrigerator was drowned out by her racing heart, each thud echoing her reluctance and fears. She glanced back at the door leading to the living room, where her father stood, a past that was both familiar and foreign, and at Jamie, whose support felt more distant as the tension grew. As she entered the kitchen, the sight that met her eyes sent a wave of revulsion through her gut. The dining chair had been knocked over, sprawled across the floor like a discarded toy. The remnants of a broken mug lay scattered, shards sparkling like tiny stars against the muted tiles. The liquid from the mug, a deep brown, spread across the floor, as dark as the emotions swirling within her. "What happened?" her voice cracked, disbelief mixing with a rising tide of worry. She surveyed the kitchen, searching for the source of the commotion. Could it be another haunting reminder that the universe was never through with testing her vulnerability? Nothing else appeared amiss, the stillness of the early morning guiding her steps forward as fear knitted itself through her veins. Suddenly, a soft mew echoed from beneath the kitchen table, and she crouched down to find a frightened kitten nestled among the shards of ceramic. Its fur was stained, but its big eyes blinked up at her with a mixture of confusion and innocence. In that moment, the kitten became an unexpected fixture of warmth amidst her turmoil, and a pang of tenderness took root in her chest. "Hey there, little one," she whispered, her voice softening as she reached out to soothe the animal. It leaned into her touch, grateful, a glimmer of hope formed through their connection. "You scared me." But before she could stand up, she remembered where she was and why she was here. She was not merely seeking solace in a kitten's eyes, she was confronting the specter of her own past. Gathering resolve, she stood and turned back towards the living room. As she crossed the threshold, the tension of her father's presence intensified. Jamie stood near him, concern etched on his face as if he could sense the emotional storm brewing. The air felt thick with their unspoken fears. "Miriam?" Her father began uncertainly, but she held up a hand, warding off his attempt to speak. "I found a kitten," she announced, hoping to ease the impending storm with this small piece of information, drawing them both out from their shadows. "It's scared. I think it got startled by everything." He softened, his features shifting from apprehension to something akin to relief. "Animals can sense our pain," he replied, his voice dropping into a gentler timbre that felt like a balm. "Maybe it was drawn to the chaos. Or maybe it just needs a safe home," Jamie chimed in, the tension wavering between them. His tender smile managed to unearth a thin, flickering light of connection. As they engaged in this unexpected moment of levity, a tentative bond began to take form. "Should we keep it?" Miriam asked, glancing between the two men in her life now, one representing the scars of her past, the other a glimpse of what the future could hold. "Why not?" Jamie's eyes sparkled with a youthful enthusiasm that Miriam couldn't help but mirror. "It could be therapeutic. Just what you need, a reason to move forward, just like that." Her father interjected, his demeanor shifting to one of incredulousness. Are we really going to make decisions about taking in a stray kitten when there are bigger things to discuss? Is there anything bigger than being present and loving? Miriam shot back, anger suddenly surging through her. The floodgates to emotions she had long bottled were beginning to tear open, each wave crashing over her with ferocity. You don't get to dictate what is bigger here. Not anymore. She felt the kitten wriggling in her arms, and its warmth reminded her of Jamie's steady presence. The contrast tugged at her heartstrings. This was her moment, potentially the last fragment of her childhood colliding with the new life she was beginning to navigate. Miriam, her father urged, unfurling the silence that had held him locked in a state of regret. I want to earn your trust. Let me help, however small that may seem. This kitten, it could help us all. She stared at the little creature, then at her father, her confusion battling the urge to forgive. A question hung in the air: whom could she trust? To open her heart to the possibility of acceptance led to a precarious edge, one she hadn't chosen yet. Suddenly, the doorbell rang out, a sharp intrusion that quieted the room. It shattered the fragile tension, leaving everyone suspended in silence, wondering what came next and praying it wasn't yet another twist in their fragile story. Without voicing any thoughts, Miriam exchanged looks with both men, each gaze suggesting unspoken fears, burdens, and the potential for change. She glanced back towards the door, a gravity pulling at her suspenseful heart, a force that could either forge a new beginning or wreak havoc on the delicate threads holding this moment together. As she hesitated, a shadow danced outside the frosted glass, making the world beyond the door feel hostile and unknown. Would this new visitor stretch the chasm between her and her past even further? Or could they be the unexpected force that might guide her toward acceptance she had never felt before? The tension was unbearable, locking her onto a precipice. As I stood there, the kitten cradled in the warmth of my arms, uncertainty flooded through me. The doorbell rang again, slicing through the thick air, propelling me toward a fragile decision. Could I face whatever lay on the other side? With a deep breath, I approached the door, my heart a cacophony of fear and hope. I had spent my life avoiding confrontation, hiding from ghosts, and the weight of expectation felt almost unbearable. Yet, here I was caught in a defining moment, needing to find the strength to confront every emotional abyss I had encountered. The door opened to reveal an unexpected face. Sarah, my ex-wife, stood on the other side, a hesitant smile playing on her lips, yet her eyes brimmed with vulnerability. Miriam, she said softly. I hope this isn't a bad time. Time seemed to freeze, an electric current weaving through the room, deepening the layers of unresolved pain and old stories. Seeing her again conjured a swirl of familiar feelings. Before I could stop myself, I stepped aside and gestured her in, the words tumbling from my mouth. No, please come in. Her presence ignited something within me, a spark, a question. Had everything that had gone unresolved between us led to this moment? Would my heart be able to reconcile the weight of our past with the hope of forgiveness? Sarah stepped into the kitchen, and her eyes darted to the pieces of the broken mug strewn across the floor, then softened as they landed on the kitten, whose wide gaze mirrored the innocence I'd thought lost in the wreckage of our shared history. Is this yours? She asked, kneeling down to approach the frightened ball of fur, who instinctively leaned toward her, soothing warmth that I wanted to recoil, to preserve the distance, yet something whispered within me, possibility of grace, of connection, was every bit as palpable as the memories coursing through me. I just found her, I said, clutching the kitten closer, an unintentional shield shielding my heart. I think we could all use some healing. That I can relate to that, Sarah replied, her voice steady but laced with the tremor of unspoken truths. It was in this moment that I sensed the depths we both had wandered through, the myriad ways in which life had separated us and yet brought us right back together into this fragile moment. The past can haunt, she continued, glancing at my father and Jamie, whose eyes flickered with an intensity that demanded my full attention. But it can also guide us toward the paths we have yet to carve. I felt Jamie's presence ripple beside me, his hand resting reassuringly on my shoulder. It was a reminder that I wasn't alone. The chance to embrace hope was still alive, shimmering in the uncertainty of our commitments to new beginnings. Maybe we can start over, I suggested hesitantly, the weight of every moment crashing upon us like a tidal wave. As I spoke, the room pulsated with unkempt emotions, a thrumming beat of vulnerability mingling with regrets and aspirations. Sarah slowly nodded, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "I've missed you, Miriam. I thought by letting go, I could find a way to heal. I was so wrong." My heart swelled with longing as I realized just how much I had truly missed her. My life felt like two Helveza spectrum of muted joy and vibrancy entwined in the chaos of grief. "There's so much I need to say," I finally admitted, the weight of the world curling around my tongue. "Then say it," she urged. "We're here now, together. Let's unravel it." Maybe today was the day I would allow my heart to speak freely, to lift the veil off the vault of silence I had meticulously curated around my pain. "I need to apologize," I began, my voice quaking with need as truth poured forth like an unrelenting river. "I shut you out when we needed each other the most. I chose fear over connection, again and again, afraid of everything we lost rather than cherishing what we could still rebuild." The tears in her eyes reflected my own as I continued. I was so consumed by my hurt, I didn't allow us to face it together, to own our pain as a shared experience. As I spoke, the walls of fear began to inch away. Memories wound through the air, moments of laughter and closeness, intertwined with grief and misunderstanding. It felt like an understanding deepened within me. Perhaps I could bond again with the people I had lost through my own actions, my own despair. "I've been running for so long too," Sarah admitted quietly, her voice filled with an almost hesitant strength. "But facing the past today, I think I finally understand that our scars don't have to define us. I want to bring life back into this, Sarah," I said urgently, "to find peace with my father, Jamie, and you. To find a way to reclaim joy amid the sorrow." As each wall began to dismantle, I caught a glimpse of Miriam, the girl I used to be, one desperately waiting for warmth, connection, and reconciliation. And in that moment, the shadows crowded in tightly, but they danced with the flickering lights of hope. The kitchen was now filled with emotional clarity, the air thick with our unsaid apologies and new commitments intertwined, shifting the atmosphere. We moved together into the light of forgiveness, like colors on a canvas destined to create something new. And as we breathed into this fragile uncertainty, I felt a rush of warmth flood through mesomathing so bright that it nearly obscured the pain we had all endured. There was no denying the bittersweet truth. With each story we shared, with every flicker of connection we forged, we were anchoring ourselves to a newfound reality. "Can any of you help me take care of her?" I asked, gesturing at the small kitten. In its eyes lay an innocent plea, amplifying our desire for family broken or Halito find solace together. Then, Sarah smiled, her heart shimmering like a rare gem. "Of course. Let's care for each other, just as we will care for her." I stood caught between the laughter of children that drifted from a distant hallway, the echoes of healing reverberating into existence. I looked at Jamie, who smiled back with a reassuring warmth that ignited something powerful, and at my father, who wore a sorrowful but eager expression. Suddenly, I felt a tug within me, as though my heart sang the crescendo of an unfinished symphony, rooting me to the moment and filling the room with an energy that could weave futures anew. With fingers trembling around the kitten in my arms, the weight of the world shifted. I realized that healing isn't a straightforward path but a labyrinth of choices, connections, and unexpected turns. Each step leads us closer to embracing the light, the warmth, the love once denied. And then, it struck me with undeniable clarity, filling my heart to the brim. Acceptance is not absence but a recalibrating of our paths intertwined through love, channeled through forgiveness and understanding. As I stood among the remnants of our shared past, I made a promise, one that shimmered on the horizon of our future. Right here, where paths converged and souls mended, I could choose to believe that love endures through every storm. For within the tangled web of heartache, the possibility of light constantly beckons. And in that realization, I whispered my final vow, one inked into the beautifully raw tapestry of our lives, forever sealed with the echoes of our hearts. Together, we will find a way.